van hits a bump, jolting Leela back into the present. The cold, unyielding metal floor presses into her bruised flesh, a cruel reminder of her reality. The air is thick with the suffocating stench of gasoline and sweat as the engine roars to life and they drive away from the scene of her horror. The biker's voice echoes in her mind, a harsh command she can't refuse. Her heart races, not just from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She thinks of Primal, who protected her. He's out there, hurt, probably enraged. Will he come for her? Can he even find her in the clutches of these depraved men? As the van speeds along the dirt road, Leela tries to gather her thoughts. She's no stranger to this world. After 6 years working at the brothel, she's seen the darker side of humanity, the twisted desires that lurk beneath the surface. But she never imagined she'd be on the receiving end of such brutality. The bikers had always been the roughest clients, but they'd never crossed this line before. Her thoughts turned to her boss, Madame Luna, the woman who had taken her in off the streets when she had nowhere else to go. Luna had promised her safety, a roof over her head, and enough money to escape her past. But now, as the van's tires kick up dust and gravel, Leela wonders if she's just another pawn in a game she never wanted to play. The bikers had always been a volatile bunch, their loyalty to Luna flimsy at best, and their disregard for the rules even more so. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he says, his breath hot and foul in the cold air. "You're gonna be just fine. We're gonna have some fun, you and I." His grip on her thigh is painfully tight, and she feels the beginnings of another panic attack. She tries to scream, but her voice is lost in the roar of the engine. His other hand clamps over her mouth, muffling her protests. His grin promises more pain if she resists. He starts to peel away the fur jacket that she took from the van floor. It was the brothel's jacket all the girls had. Goosebumps rise, not just from the temperature, but from the anticipation of what's to come. The van hits a particularly nasty pothole, sending her body bouncing and her breasts smacking painfully against the floor. The biker laughs, his amusement a sadistic symphony to her ears. His hand moves from her mouth to her left breast, pinching her nipple until she whimpers. His touch is like fire against her sensitive flesh, and she can feel her body responding despite her mind's screams for it to stop. The sound of his belt echoes in the van. Before he can push into her, the van lurches to a sudden stop, the screech of tires on gravel piercing the night air. The biker is thrown off balance, his grin slipping into a snarl of surprise. The back doors fly open, and she's momentarily blinded by the sudden influx of light from outside. The cool night air fills the van. A figure steps into the opening, and she sees the glint of a knife in the moonlight. It's Madame Luna, her eyes hard as flint as she stares down at the biker. Leela has seen her many times before, but never like this, devoid of the warmth and kindness she usually exudes. In this moment, the madam, the boss of the brothel, looks every inch the fierce protector. The fur that symbolized Leela's degradation is torn away, exposing her to the cold, but a spark of hope ignites as she sees the resolve etched in Luna's face. Let's go, Luna orders, her voice firm. We're leaving. Dazed and trembling, Leela looks down at her barely there ensemble. Pick it up, Madame Luna chuckled, the jacket. It clings to her like a second skin, the tattered remnants of her once elegant corset and panties. She's been on the run for days, and the thought of putting on more than this feels like an unattainable luxury. But she knows better than to argue with Luna, especially in her current state. The biker snatches Leela's arm, his grip like a vice. You owe us, he sneers, his breath reeking of cheap alcohol. 2 weeks, that's all you have. We're gonna get our piece of tail one way or another. With shaky hands, she tugs the frayed fabric over her bruised body, the fur brushing against her exposed skin and sending a shiver down her spine. The cool air of the early morning seeps in, reminding her of the harsh reality she's been thrust into. Each movement stings, a painful reminder of her encounter with the brutes from the night before. The material clings to her sweat and dirt, a grim testament to her desperation. The doors slam shut, and the van lurches forward again, leaving Leela trembling in the dusty wake. Madame Luna's hand is gentle as she leads Leela back to the brothel. In the light of the early morning, the once familiar building seems alien, its red-painted exterior. Inside, the warmth and light embrace her, the walls whispering of comfort and refuge. Yet, despite the familiar surroundings, she can't shake the cold from her bones. Luna takes her to a private bathroom, the air thick with the scent of lavender and vanilla, and the metallic tang of fear that clings to her. The room is large and luxurious, with a clawfoot tub that looks like a heavenly reprieve. Get in, Luna instructs firmly, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and concern. You need to clean up. The warm water is a balm on Leela's bruised body as she sinks into the tub, her muscles releasing their tension inch by inch. The candles flicker on the edge, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and she closes her eyes, trying to block out the images of the night's events. The sound of running water fills the room, a soothing rhythm that almost drowns out the echoes of the biker's grunts and taunts in her head. Luna, a silent sentinel at the door, watches Leela with a fierce protectiveness. Her eyes, once filled with anger, have softened into a mix of sadness and determination, and she approaches the tub. Luna gently takes the ruined clothing from Leela and tosses it into a nearby bin. You don't need that anymore, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Madame Luna's face is etched with a mix of anger and sadness. You can't keep running, girl, she says, her voice firm but not unkind. You're going to get yourself killed. She grabs a washcloth and starts to clean the dirt and blood from Leela's skin. The bathroom is a sanctuary within the brothel, a place where the harshness of the outside world is washed away. The walls are lined with ornate tiles, and the large mirror reflects the candlelight, casting a warm glow across the room. The scent of lavender and vanilla fills the air, a soothing balm to Leela's frayed nerves. As Madame Luna works, Leela feels the tension in her body begin to ease, the warmth of the water seeping into her muscles like a gentle lover's embrace. Luna's lecture is a low murmur in the background, her words a mix of anger and worry. "You can't just run off like that, Leela," she says, her voice firm but laced with a hint of pain. "You know the rules. You're a part of this family now, and we protect each other." She sighs, her eyes never leaving Leela's reflection in the mirror as she continues to scrub away the grime of the night. Leela nods, the warm water of the tub rising up to her chin. She tries to ignore the sting of the soap as it meets her fresh wounds, focusing instead on the comforting scent of lavender and vanilla. She opens her mouth to speak, but the words catch in her throat. How could she explain what happened in the cave with Primal? The way he'd claimed her, the fierce passion that had consumed them both, the way she felt alive for the first time in years. It was different, she finally manages, her voice shaking. He was different. I didn't know what to do. Madame Luna's expression softens slightly, the anger in her eyes fading into something more complex. Different, she repeats, dipping the washcloth into the water before continuing to cleanse Leela's body. "Tell me about it," she urges, her voice softer now. "What happened in that cave?" The words spill out of Leela in a rush. The details of Primal's touch, his eyes, the heat of his body, and the intensity of their coupling. Madame Luna's eyes widen slightly as she listens, the tension in the room shifting from one of fear and anger to something else. Something that makes Leela's pulse quicken, despite the horrors she's just recounted. Without a word, Madame Luna strips off her own clothes, revealing a body that's seen its fair share of battles. Her scars tell tales of strength and survival, compared to Leela's youthful softness. She steps into the tub, the water splashing gently as she settles in behind Leela. Her warmth surrounds Leela, her strong arms encircling her waist as she pulls her back against her chest. Leela's breath hitches at the unexpected intimacy, her body responding to the closeness despite her pain and fear. Luna's breasts press into her back, the softness a kind memory. Her hands glide over Leela's sore skin, her touch gentle yet firm as she cleans away the last traces of the night's horrors. Leela feels a strange comfort in her embrace, a sense of protection she's never felt from another woman. As the washcloth moves over her breasts, her hands graze her nipples, sending a jolt of sensation through her body. Leela gasps, her eyes flying open to meet her madame's in the mirror. Luna's gaze holds hers, a silent question in her eyes. Leela nods, her body responding to the unspoken permission. The older woman's hand slides down her torso, tracing the curve of her stomach before delving between her legs. Leela's thighs part reflexively, and she feels the first stirrings of arousal, the memory of primal strength and size making her wet and needy. "Tell me, Leela," Luna whispers, her breath warm against her ear. "How big was he?" Her fingers glide up and down through Leela's pussy, finding her clit swollen and sensitive. Leela gasps, her back arching as the first wave of pleasure crashes over her. "Never ending," Leela murmured, her eyes half-lidded with desire as she relived Primal's brutal claiming. And so strong. Madame Luna's touch grew firmer, her thumb rubbing circles around the engorged clit. He felt. Primal. Luna's hand moved away from Leela's pussy, reaching instead for a bottle of oil on the tub's edge. She poured a generous amount into her palm, the viscous liquid shimmering. "Show me," she commanded, her voice a smoky whisper. "Show me how he took you." Leela could feel Luna's eyes watching her as she reached down, her hand mimicking Primal's earlier movements. Her fingers traced her slit, slick with the combination of the oil and her own arousal. She spread her legs wider, displaying herself for her madam without shame. "He was so rough," she whispered, her cheeks flushing as she recounted the details of his size. "It hurt so much, but it was different." Madame Luna's gaze darkened, her eyes hooded with desire as she watched Leela's hand work between her thighs. She leaned closer, her own hand mirroring Leela's movements in the water, her fingers slipping through the oil before disappearing beneath the surface to her own desires. "How rough?" she asked, her voice a seductive purr. "Tell me everything." Leela's breath hitched as she recounted the relentless stretching of her holes, the way Primal had claimed her without mercy. She could still feel the burn, the way he'd filled her so completely that she thought she might break. She whispered her words, the sound of them in the quiet bathroom, the biker's taunts, and the animalistic sounds of their lust still fresh on her mind. Madame Luna's hand moved in time with hers, their rhythms syncing as they both explored their memories of brutal pleasure. The madame's control was absolute, her movements deliberate and precise, as she teased Leela's swollen clit, bringing her to the edge of climax before abruptly pulling away. "Is that how it felt?" she asked, her voice a dark caress. "Tell me more." Leela nodded, her eyes glazed with a mix of pain and desire. "It was like nothing I've ever felt before," she stammered, her voice trembling as she recounted the agony and the ecstasy of her time with Primal. The madame's hand moved to Leela's entrance, her slick digits pushing inside her, the pressure exquisite. "And did you scream for him?" she asked, her eyes holding Leela's in the mirror. "Did you beg for more?" Leela's eyes widened, and she nodded frantically, unable to speak as the memory of Primal's merciless pounding filled her mind. Madame Luna's fingers mimicked the beast's relentless rhythm, the sensation making Leela's legs tremble. Madame Luna chuckled darkly, her strokes growing more demanding. "Good girl," she murmured. "Let it out. Tell me how much you missed me." The words were a catalyst, and Leela's orgasm crashed over her like a wave, her body shuddering with the force of it. She cried out, her voice echoing off the tiles as Madame Luna continued to pump her hand, pushing her through peak after peak of pleasure that mixed with the pain of her bruises. When the tremors finally subsided, Leela collapsed back against her madame's chest, her breathing ragged. Madame Luna's arms tightened around her, her breath hot on her neck. "You're going to pay for what you did," she whispered, her voice a seductive promise of retribution. "But for now, rest." The water cooled, but Leela couldn't bring herself to move. Her body was a tapestry of sensation, the aftershocks of her climax still resonating through her limbs. Madame Luna's grip on her was firm yet gentle, a reminder that she was not alone in this. Her hand left Leela's pussy, tracing a path up her body to her neck, Her thumb stroked her throat, the pressure just shy of being too much, a silent promise of the power she held. "You liked that, didn't you?" Madame Luna asked, her voice a low purr. Leela nodded, unable to form words. The madame's touch moved to her chin, tilting her head back so she could look into her eyes. "But you're not ready for what's next." Her fingers dug into the tender skin, just enough to make Leela whimper. "You need to be taught a lesson, one you won't forget." With trembling hands, Leela picked up the oil bottle, feeling the weight of the cold glass in her grip. Madame Luna nodded gently, a soft smile playing on her lips, offering silent encouragement. Leela's eyes locked with hers as she now sat across from Luna in the tub, as she brought the bottle closer to her own body, feeling a mix of trepidation and arousal. Madame Luna's gaze was intense, a fiery demand that sent a shiver down Leela's spine. The lid twisted off with a wet pop, and the scent of the oil filled the air, thick and musky. The candles flickered in the stillness, their light dancing across the water's surface, casting shadows on the walls of the bathroom. With a deep breath, Leela took the bottle from Madame Luna's outstretched hand. The glass felt cold and slippery against her skin as she tipped it over, watching the oil cascade out like a liquid embrace. It splashed against the water, sending ripples across the surface, and she felt a sudden urge to hold back. But she knew she couldn't. Madame Luna's eyes were on her, unwavering, and she couldn't disappoint her. With a trembling hand, she guided the bottle between her thighs, feeling the coolness of the glass against the sensitive flesh of her lips. The lid clicked back into place with a soft sound that seemed to echo through the room. Luna reached out, her hand ghosting over the water before plunging beneath it, her fingers finding the bottle's neck. She guided it back to Leela's hand, her eyes never leaving hers. The message was clear. She wanted Leela to continue. And so, with a quiver in her voice, Leela did. She placed the tip of the bottle against her pussy, feeling the resistance give way as the glass slid into her. The sensation was cold and strange, but she couldn't deny the heat building in her core. The oil coated her insides, a slick, viscous warmth that seemed to spread through her entire body. Madame Luna's gaze, filled with a hunger that sent a thrill down Leela's spine. Each stroke felt like a declaration of power, a silent promise that she was in control. Madame Luna reaches out, her hand sliding into the water, and Leela knows what she wants. She pulls the bottle out, the oil trailing off it in a shimmering thread, and passes it over. The glass feels warm from her body heat. Madame takes it from her, her fingers lingering for a moment before she brings it to her own genitals. Leela watches, transfixed, as Madame Luna's hand moves in a slow, deliberate rhythm, the bottle disappearing and reappearing between her legs. Their eyes are locked, their breaths mingling in the stillness of the room. The sound of the bottle moving in and out of Madame Luna fills the air, a wet, slick sound. Madame Luna's expression is one of concentration, her eyes dark with desire. "Now," she says, her voice a low purr that sends a thrill through Leela's body. "Your turn." Madame Luna's hand leaves the bottle, and Leela feels a sudden emptiness within her. She watches, breath held as Madame Luna takes her place in front of her, her legs spread wide, her genitals glistening with the oil. The bottle is passed back and forth between them, each taking turns filling themselves with its thick caress. The sensation is strange, almost alien, but as the minutes pass, Leela feels her body begin to respond, the slickness of the oil turning her movements into a dance of sensation. They move in a rhythm as old as time, each stroke of the bottle against their skin a silent conversation of pain and pleasure. Madame Luna's breasts heave with every breath she takes, her nipples hard and erect. Leela's eyes trace the lines of her body, the curves and dips that she knows so well, as Madame Luna's hand guides the bottle in and out of her, her hips rocking in time with the motion. Leela clenches the glass as Madame watches her with a hungry gaze. The water in the tub sloshes around them, a gentle reminder of their surroundings as they lose themselves in the moment. Leela's hand shakes with the effort of holding the bottle, her arm growing tired, but she doesn't dare stop. Madame Luna's eyes, a silent command, fuels her determination. With a sudden surge of desire, Leela turns back, her hands reaching for the sides of the tub to brace herself. Madame Luna takes the cue, her hand moving from her genitals to Leela's, guiding the bottle in deeper, the oil spilling out and running down Leela's thighs. Leela gasps, her body arching as the pressure builds within her. Madame Luna's fingers trace the line of the bottle, her touch featherlight against Leela's skin, setting it alight with sensation. Now, Madame Luna whispers, her breath hot against Leela's ear. "Let me show you how it's done." She takes the bottle, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. With a gentle push, she angles it downward, the cold glass nudging at Leela's anus. Leela tenses, her breath hitching in anticipation. Madame Luna's hand is firm but gentle, pushing the bottle in with a slow, deliberate stroke. The sensation is unlike anything Leela has ever felt before, strange, but not unpleasant. Madame Luna's hand slides down the length of the bottle, her fingers slipping into the oil that coats it, her movements precise and controlled. The pressure builds as the bottle sinks deeper, stretching Leela open in a way that is both uncomfortable and exhilarating. She gasps, her knuckles turning white as she clutches the tub's edge, her eyes squeezed shut. "Breathe," Madame Luna soothes, her voice a gentle command. Leela takes a deep breath, feeling the muscles in her ass relax slightly. The bottle slides in further, the coldness giving way to a warm, full feeling. Madame Luna's hand reaches up, her fingers finding Leela's clitoris, the touch like a spark that ignites a wildfire within her. With a sudden, smooth motion, Madame Luna pulls the bottle from Leela's tight passage, the oil glistening in the water. Leela gasps, her eyes flying open, watching as Madame Luna brings the bottle to her lips. She sucks the bottle with a sensual grace, her tongue swirling around the glass as she tastes Leela's essence. The sight sends a bolt of arousal through Leela, and she feels her body clench around the emptiness left behind. Madame Luna's eyes never leave Leela's as she pulls the bottle away with a pop, the oil shining on her lips like a decadent dessert. Again, she murmurs, her voice thick with desire. Leela nods, her breaths coming in short gasps. Madame Luna's hand is a blur as she slides the bottle back in, filling Leela up once more. The feeling is indescribable fullness and emptiness, pain and pleasure, all wrapped into one. The bottle retreats with a soft squelch, and Madame Luna brings it back to her lips, sucking it clean with a slow, deliberate motion that makes Leela's toes curl. The taste on the glass is a heady mix of desire and submission, and she can feel her orgasm building, a crescendo that seems to resonate through every fiber of her being. Madame Luna slides the bottle back in, the pressure against her anus a sweet reminder of her vulnerability. She feels the glass slick with oil as it moves in and out, a strange, intimate dance that seems to echo the beating of her heart. Each pull is met with a soft groan from Leela's lips, the sensation of being filled and then emptied a delicious torture. With a wicked grin, Madame Luna pulls the bottle from Leela's ass again, the oil glistening on the glass like a jewel. She brings it to her mouth. The taste, another rich and musky heady blend of arousal and obedience that sends a shiver down her spine. The sound of her own sucking echoes in the stillness, a testament to the power dynamics that have played out before. Leela watches, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and desire, as Madame Luna's tongue darts out to catch the last droplets of juices clinging to the bottle. The unspoken challenge hangs in the air like a fine mist. Leela feels her cheeks flush, her breathing growing more ragged as she anticipates the next thrust. "Look at that," Madame Luna murmurs, her eyes shining with pride. "So beautiful, so stretched for me." Leela can't help but feel a thrill of fearful excitement as Madame Luna's gaze lingers on the gaping hole between her cheeks. The woman's eyes are dark with desire, a hunger that seems to consume her from within. Madame Luna's hand moves to her own genitals, her fingers playing with her clitoris. Leela feels the heat of Madame Luna's gaze as if it's a physical touch, a brand that marks her as the other woman's property. "Please," she whispers, her voice a needy purr. "Let me do it better. I'm a whore for this. I want to make you happy." Madame Luna's smile widens, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. With trembling hands, Leela reaches for the bottle, her gaze never leaving Madame Luna's. She brings it to her own ass. She takes a deep breath, steeling herself for what's to come. With a gentle push, she sinks the bottle back into her tight passage, her muscles clenching around it as she tries to take it deeper. "Look at me," Madame Luna orders, her voice a seductive purr. Leela opens her eyes, her gaze locking back at Madame Luna's as she continues to push the bottle in and out of herself, her movements growing more confident with each stroke. The sound of the glass sliding through her lubricated ass fills the room, a wet, rhythmic symphony of submission. "Good girl," Madame Luna praises, her voice thick with lust. "But I think you can handle more." Leela nods eagerly, her eyes glazed over with a mix of fear and excitement. "I want your fist in my ass, madam," she whispers, the words a desperate plea. Madame Luna's smile grows, a twisted expression that sends a shiver down Leela's spine. "Very well," Madame Luna says, her voice a smoky command that sends a shiver down Leela's spine. She stands, the water sluicing off her body in rivulets, and Leela can't help but stare at her, the desire to be claimed by her mentors, hand a driving force. Madame Luna steps out of the tub, her skin glistening with water and oil. She takes a towel, drying herself off with slow, deliberate strokes, each movement a silent promise of what's to come. Leela watches, her heart racing, as Madame Luna moves to the dresser and opens a drawer. She pulls out a velvet pouch, the contents clinking together ominously. Madame Luna's eyes never leave Leela's as she opens the pouch and pulls out a set of metal rings and a bottle of lube. "You're going to stretch for me, aren't you?" Madame Luna says, her voice a mix of sweetness and steel. Leela nods, her pulse pounding in her ears. Madame Luna's hand is steady as she pours the lube over the rings. The sound of the gelatinous liquid hitting the metal sending a shiver down Leela's spine. She knows what's coming next, the ultimate test of her endurance and loyalty. Madame Luna's hand is gentle, but firm as she presses the first ring against Leela's anus. Leela's eyes squeeze shut as the metal pushes past the tight muscle. She gasps, her fingers digging into the tub's edge as Madame Luna works the ring in deeper. The pain is intense, a sharp burn that makes her toes curl again, but she knows she can't stop now. She takes a deep breath, willing herself to relax, and feels the ring slip into place. Madame Luna adds another, then another, the sensation building with each one. Leela's ass is stretched wider, the cold metal an intrusion that somehow feels right. Madame Luna's eyes never leave hers, the intensity of her gaze a silent promise that she'll push her to the limit. The last ring slides into place with a pop, and Leela's breath hisses out. She's stretched to the max, the metal rings digging into her flesh, but she knows it's not enough. Madame Luna's hand is warm and firm as it replaces the cold metal, her fingertips pushing into Leela's tight passage, spreading the oil around before she slides a finger in. Leela's body tenses at the intrusion, her muscles protesting, but she forces herself to relax. Madame Luna's touch is gentle, almost tender, as she stretches Leela further. The sensation is strange, but not entirely unpleasant. Leela can feel Madame Luna's knuckles brushing against her inner walls, the feeling of fullness. The sound of Madame Luna's fist sliding in and out of her ass fills the room, a rhythmic, primal beat that seems to resonate with the pounding of her heart. Madame Luna's other hand is on Leela's clitoris, her thumb circling it with a practiced precision that sends waves of pleasure crashing through her. The pain is a sharp contrast to the pleasure, a dance of extremes that sends her spiraling toward a climax. Leela's eyes lock in on Madame Luna's face, her features contorted with concentration. Madame Luna's eyes are focused on Leela, reading her every reaction, her every twitch and gasp. She knows exactly how much Leela can take, and she's pushing her to the edge. Leela's body is a canvas of sensation, her skin slick with sweat and oil, her muscles taut with tension. With a deep breath, Leela stands up, the water cascading down her body. leaving a trail of oil in its wake. She turns around, her legs shaking slightly as she bends over the side of the tub, presenting herself to Madame Luna. Her ass is high in the air, the rings glinting in the candlelight like a twisted crown. Madame Luna's hand is a blur as it flies through the air, delivering a sharp slap to Leela's ass. The sound echoes through the room, a reminder of who's in charge. "Don't move," she says, her voice firm. Leela nods, her cheeks stinging from the impact. She watches in the mirror as Madame Luna walks to the bathroom counter, her eyes never leaving the reflection of her quivering body. The array of sex toys scattered across the marble surface seems to taunt her, each one a tool of pleasure and pain waiting to be used. Madame Luna's hand lingers over them, considering her options. With a flick of her wrist, she picks up a vibrator, the sleek device humming to life in her hand. Leela feels her heart race faster at the sight of it, the memory of its intense vibrations making her legs quiver. Madame Luna's eyes glint in the light as she brings the wand closer, the buzzing ominously. "Don't move," she says, her voice a low command that sends a thrill down Leela's spine. Leela nods, her breaths coming in short gasps as she braces herself for what's to come. Madame Luna's hand is steady as she presses the vibrator against Leela's clitoris, the sensation like a bolt of lightning that shoots through her. She feels her body jerk, the pleasure so intense it's almost painful. "Fuck," Leela gasps, unable to hold back the obscenity. Madame Luna's smile widens, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "That's it, my pet," she murmurs. "Let it all out." Leela's mouth is a whirlwind of dirty talk, her voice hoarse with passion as she begs for more. Madame Luna's fist is buried to the wrist in her ass, the metal rings clinking together with every thrust. "Yo, you like that, don't you?" Madame Luna says, her voice a seductive purr. "You're such a slut for it, aren't you?" Leela's response is a stream of profanities, her words a desperate mantra of pleasure and pain. "Yes, I'm a fucking whore for your hand in my ass," she cries out, her voice echoing off the tiles. Madame Luna's smile widens, the sound of Leela's filthy mouth only serving to heighten her arousal. With a look in her eye, Madame Luna pulls the vibrator away, leaving Leela's clitoris pulsing with need. "Beg for it," she whispers, her breath hot against Leela's ear. "Tell me what a dirty slut you are." Leela's cheeks flame with arousal, but she doesn't hold back. "I'm your fucking slut, madam," she moans, her voice thick with lust. "I love it when you fist me. Make me come for you." Madame Luna's hand withdraws slightly, and Leela feels the pressure ease before it slams back in, harder and deeper than before. The metal rings bite into her flesh, sending a wave of pain that morphs into pleasure. "That's it," Madame Luna says, her voice a seductive growl. "Let go. Embrace it." Leela's dirty words spill out, a filthy symphony that fills the air. "I'm your whore, madam," she cries, her voice a ragged moan. "Your little slut. I love your fist in my ass, anything you want." Madame Luna's hand speeds up, the sound of her fist moving in and out of Leela's ass a wet, slapping beat that matches the racing of Leela's heart. "That's it," Madame Luna murmurs, her voice a dark caress. Tell me how much you love it. Leela's voice is a hoarse whisper as she gives in to the filthy words that spill from her lips. I'm your little fuck toy, she gasps. Your dirty little whore. Madame Luna's smile widens at Leela's words, the sound of Leela's pleasure mixed with pain, only adding to her own arousal. Keep talking, she urges, her fist moving faster. I want to hear how much you need to come again. Leela's eyes are locked in the mirror, watching as Madame Luna's hand pistons in and out of her stretched ass. She can't hold back the stream of obscenities that spill from her mouth, each word a declaration of her wanton need. I'm your dirty little cunt, she pants, the words feeling like a release as much as the pressure building within her. You're slut. You're whore. Fuck me harder, madam. Madame Luna's hand stills for a moment, a smirk playing on her lips. Very good, pet, she praises, her tone dripping with sarcasm. But now, it's time. She pulls the rings out one by one, each tug accompanied by a sharp smack to Leela's ass, the pain making her jolt forward with every removal. The sensation is exquisite, a delicate balance of agony and ecstasy that sends her spiraling closer to the edge of climax. Yo, yes, Madame Luna coos, watching Leela's reaction in the mirror with a twisted satisfaction. You're going to come for me now. She presses the vibrator back to Leela's clitoris, the vibrations setting her nerves on fire. The pressure is unbearable, the pleasure so intense it feels like it's going to split her in two. She drops to her knees, her body slipping off the tub's edge as she falls forward, her body landing heavily on the cold, wet tiles. Madame Luna follows her down. Keep begging, she whispers, her voice a seductive hiss. Leela gasps, her breaths coming in ragged pants. Madame Luna's hand is a vice around the back of her neck, her grip firm but not painful. I'm going to eat that ass, Madame Luna says, her voice a dark promise. You're going to come for me, baby girl. The words resonate through Leela's body, setting every nerve ending alight. She whimpers, her eyes glazed with desire. Madame Luna's fist no longer inside her, leaving her ass feeling empty and used. But before she can miss it, the woman's mouth is there, replacing the cold emptiness with the warm, wet pressure of her tongue. Madame Luna's tongue laps at her asshole, teasing the stretched opening with feather-light strokes. The sensation sends shockwaves through Leela's body, making her quiver with anticipation, her hands falling to the floor, palms flat against the cold tiles as she braces herself for what's to come. Madam, Leela whimpers, her voice a needy plea. I'm going to come. Oh, fuck. I'm going to come. Madame Luna's mouth moves down to Leela's vagina, her tongue sliding through her wet mess with an expertise that leaves no doubt as to who's in control. Leela's hips buck against Madame Luna's face, her moans echoing through the steamy bathroom like a desperate prayer. You're mine, Madame Luna murmurs, her voice muffled against Leela's clitoris. Mine to use, mine to claim. Leela's body is a taut bowstring, her knees bent, legs spread, her ass high in the air. She can feel the cold, hard marble against her cheek, her chest pressing into the damp floor. The world narrows to the sensation of Madame Luna's tongue on her clitoris, the woman's breath hot and wet against her sensitive flesh. Madame Luna's hand slides the vibrating wand into Leela's ass, the buzzing sensation adding to the symphony of pleasure and pain that has taken over her body. The cool marble floor against her cheek grounds Leela as Madame Luna's tongue works her clitoris, the vibrations from the wand in her ass sending her spiraling. She can feel the tension coiling tighter within her, a storm of pleasure that threatens to shatter her. Madame Luna's grip on her hips is like steel, her mouth relentless, her tongue flicking and lapping with an expertise that leaves Leela feeling both vulnerable and incredibly aroused. With a sudden, surprising grace, Madame Luna shifts her position, collapsing flat on the floor. Leela watches, looking back, her breath hitching as she lies on her back. Madame Luna's legs spread wide, inviting her to straddle her face. The idea of sitting on her mentor's face, claiming her so completely, sends a thrill through her. She swings her leg over, positioning herself so that her vagina is directly above Madame Luna's mouth. The woman's eyes gleam with excitement, her tongue darting out to lick at Leela's clitoris in anticipation. Leela sighs with relief as the vibrator is withdrawn from her ass, the sensation of emptiness immediately replaced by the heat of Madame Luna's tongue. The wand is set aside, forgotten for the moment, as Madame Luna's mouth takes over, her tongue delving deep inside Leela's vagina. Leela's hips rock involuntarily, her body moving with an instinctive rhythm as Madame Luna's mouth works its magic. Madame Luna's tongue traces a path from Leela's clitoris to her asshole as Leela rocks, tasting the sweetness of her desire. Leela gasps, her body tensing with the sudden shift in sensation. Madame Luna's eyes gleam with satisfaction as she laps at Leela's stretched openings, the taste of her own juices mingling with the lingering oil from the ritual. The act feels almost sacred, a declaration of their shared power and submission. The days pass in a haze of pain and fear. Leela receives no explanation, no reassurance. The other girls in the brothel avoid her, whispering behind her back. She sees pity and revulsion in their eyes, wondering if they know what's coming. She's locked in her room, the only visitor being Madame Luna, who brings her meals and changes her bandages with a cool efficiency that sends shivers down her spine. The bruises fade, but the memory of Primal's brutal claiming is etched into her soul. The night of the meeting arrives, and Leela is led into a back room, the air thick with the scent of leather and cigarette smoke. The bikers are there, their eyes raking over her body like claws. At the center of the room, a table is set with maps and weapons, a reminder of the world outside the brothel's walls. The leader, a burly man with a scraggly beard, sits with his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes are cold, holding a flicker of challenge. Madame Luna stands beside her, her expression unreadable. "Tell them what you know," she whispers, her voice low and firm. Leela takes a deep breath, her heart racing as she recounts the night in the cave. The bikers listen intently, their eyes never leaving hers, their expressions a mix of disbelief and anger. When she finishes, the room is silent. The only sound is the ticking of the clock on the wall. The leader's gaze narrows, his hand sliding to the handle of the knife at his side. So you're saying you got our boy riled up, and he killed my brother? His voice is a low growl, the threat in his words as palpable as the tension in the room. You're a dead girl walking, he sneers. Leela's heart races, her mind frantically searching for a way to placate the biker. I don't know where he is, she whispers, her voice shaking. I just want to go back to work, please. The leader's grip on the knife tightens, his eyes like two black pits in the dimly lit room. You expect us to believe that? He snarls, standing up from his chair. You think we're just gonna let you waltz back into that whorehouse without settling the score? Leela's knees threaten to buckle, but she forces herself to stand firm, her gaze never wavering from his. I don't know where he is, she repeats, her voice a shaky whisper. But I know he won't hurt me. It's a desperate gamble, playing on the biker's ego, but she's out of options. The leader's eyes narrow into slits, his grip on the knife tightening. You think we're scared of some furry freak? He takes a step closer, the other bikers shifting restlessly around the table. You're gonna tell us where he is, or I'm gonna start carving you up like the little whore you are. Leela's had enough. She's not just an object to be used and discarded. She's not just a pawn in their twisted games. With a snarl of her own, she spits directly into the biker's face, the glob of saliva hanging for a moment before sliding down his cheek. His hand flies up to wipe it away, a look of fury contorting his features. He pulls his belt free, the leather slapping against his thigh as he takes another menacing step forward. Madame Luna is quicker. She steps between Leela and the biker, her body a barricade of defiance. You lay a hand on her, and you'll answer to me, she says, her voice cold and hard as ice. The biker pauses, the air thick with the promise of violence. For a moment, it seems like he might strike Luna instead, but something in her gaze gives him pause. Maybe it's the way she holds herself, all steel and fire, or the way she grips the knife hidden in the folds of her dress. With surprising agility, she snatches the belt from the leader's hand. If she's to be punished, she says, it'll be by my hand. She turns to Leela, her eyes softening for a fraction of a second. Bend over the table, whore, she commands, her voice firm but not unkind. Leela hesitates, but the madame's expression leaves no room for argument. She does as she's told, her heart hammering against her ribs. Madame Luna's hand is firm and precise as she lands the first blow with the belt. It stings, a sharp pain that brings tears to her eyes, but it's nothing compared to the fear of what the bikers would do. The leather kisses her skin again and again, a dance of pain that's almost rhythmic. Each stroke is calculated, not the wild, furious lashes she'd feared from the biker's rage. There's a strange comfort in the predictability of it, a sense of control amidst the chaos. With each strike, Leela feels the tension in the room shift. The bikers watch, their eyes glinting with a mix of arousal and anger. Madame Luna's movements are almost mesmerizing, the snap of the belt a promise of what could have been. Her skin burns, the sting growing with each blow, but she endures, biting her lip to keep from crying out. She feels the biker's eyes on her, their hunger for blood and pain almost palpable. But Madame Luna isn't just meting out a punishment, she's buying time. "You're filthy," she says, her voice dripping with disdain. "Get cleaned up. You have wet yourself. The girls will keep our guests entertained." The bikers leer at the mention of the other girls, their eyes lighting up at the prospect of fresh meat. The madam nods to the other women in the room, and they move in, a swarm of seductive whispers and fluttering lashes. The leader's gaze lingers on Leela's bruised and trembling form before finally tearing away. "Fine," he grunts, his grip on her arm momentarily slackening. "But she better not smell like piss when she comes back." Madame Luna gives a curt nod before shoving Leela toward the bathroom. "Make it quick," she hisses. The second the bathroom door clicks shut, Leela throws herself into the shower, the water scalding her skin. She scrubs furiously, trying to wash away the feel of the biker's touch, the scent of his sweat and lust. Her skin stings from the abrasive soap, but she doesn't care. She needs to be clean. As she washes the last of the grime down the drain, she hears the muffled sounds of the madam's voice, the low rumble of the biker's responses. The madam had bought her a few precious minutes with her clever ruse, but she knows it won't be enough. She needs to get out of here, find Primal, and warn him about the danger that's closing in. The water turns cold, and she shuts it off, her body trembling from the shock. Wrapping a towel around herself, she opens the door a crack, peering into the hallway. The bikers are entranced by the brothel sirens, their laughter and lewd suggestions echoing down the corridor. Madame Luna stands tall, a proud lioness among her pride, her hand firmly on the leader's genitals. "Money first," she repeats, her voice a deadly purr. "And make sure it's all there. My girls don't come cheap." Leela watches from the shadows, her eyes wide with shock and gratitude. She'd never seen Madame Luna so primal. The leader nods frantically, his cheeks reddening. "Yes, yes, of course," he stammers, his voice a mere whine as he digs into his pocket, extracting a thick wad of cash. He slaps it onto the table, his eyes never leaving Luna's hand as she releases his penis with a disdainful sneer. The other bikers, momentarily forgotten in their anticipation, leer at the brothel's offerings as more girls enter the room, the sound of their boots heavy on the wooden floorboards. Madame Luna claps her hands together, a sharp sound that echoes through the hall. "Girls," she calls out, her voice a whip-crack of authority. "These fine gentlemen need some company." The line of girls, dressed in their most alluring attire, shuffle in, their eyes downcast. Leela seizes the opportunity to slip away unnoticed, her heart hammering in her chest. She knows she doesn't have much time. The bathroom is a blur as she hastily dresses, her trembling fingers struggling with the fastenings of her corset. The fabric feels like a prison, a constant reminder of her captivity, but she doesn't dare risk leaving without it. She takes one last look in the mirror, the bruises on her face and neck, rough and unappealing. Madame Luna's voice floats down the hall, her words a siren's song of greed and lust. "Look at her," she purrs, her hand sliding up the leader's thigh to cup his penis again. "Such a dirty little thing. I'll have her cleaned up and ready to spill her secrets in no time. The bikers chuckle, their eyes glued to the madam's hand as she squeezes, and Leela knows she's bought herself a few precious moments more. With trembling hands, she yanks on the black stockings, her skin sticking to the fabric as she pulls them up her bruised legs. They're not just any stockings, but the ones she'd worn during the brothel's monthly fur night, a costume party that had seemed so innocent before her encounter with Primal. The fur jacket with the brothel's logo, a snarling panther, is next. It's a ridiculous outfit, but it's all she has. The cat ears sit atop her head at an awkward angle, a reminder of the carefree days she's lost. The costume is a size too small, hugging her curves tightly and highlighting the fresh bruises marring her skin. The tail swishes behind her as she moves, a mocking reminder of the beast she'd called forth in the cave. Madame Luna's eyes had narrowed when she saw the costume, a hint of understanding flitting across her features. She'd said nothing, but her grip had tightened on the knife, a silent promise of protection. As the sounds of the bikers' debauchery grow louder, Madame Luna pulls Leela aside, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination that makes Leela's heart race. "You need to go to him," she whispers, her voice urgent. "Warn him of the danger that's coming. Tell him." Her voice trails off, and for a moment, Leela sees a flicker of something in her eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret. "Tell him you need him." Leela nods, the weight of the task settling heavily on her shoulders. But even as she nods, she feels a twinge of doubt. Primal had claimed her in the heat of passion, but was he truly her savior? Or was he just another creature of the night, driven by instinct and desire? Madame Luna must sense her hesitation, for she squeezes her arm, her grip firm and reassuring. "You're not just a whore, Leela," she says, her voice a low growl. "You're more than that. Now go, run." With that, Leela turns and flees, her feet barely touching the ground as she sprints through the brothel and out into the night, a blur against the backdrop of the shadowy establishment. The cool night air stings her flushed skin, the moon's eerie light casting elongated shadows across the deserted street. Desperate for a way out, Leela knows she cannot stay. She needs to find Primal, her only hope against the encroaching darkness. The memory of their escape, of the trees lining the path, serves as a beacon, a guiding star in her mind's eye. If she can reach that tree line, perhaps she can find a clue, a sign indicating the location of his hiding place. Her determination sharpens her resolve in an instant. Her lungs burn with each frantic breath, but Leela refuses to falter. Adrenaline surges through her, a liquid fire fueling her desperate flight. The smooth cobblestone streets give way to rough dirt and gravel, her heels echoing faintly and then diminishing as she presses further out from the town's confines. The dark, ominous woods stand in the distance, stretching relentlessly ahead, their looming presence barely deterring her forward momentum. The weight of the bikers' malicious intent, their menacing eyes fixed on her, fuels Leela's resolve with each step forward, igniting a burning need to persevere. The tree line is now only a short distance away, the skeletal fingers of the towering pines reaching out to envelop her, a cruel reminder of the forest's untamed nature. She stumbles, her legs threatening to collapse beneath the relentless strain. But Leela refuses to succumb. The vivid memory of Primal's fiery gaze, the phantom touch of his hands on her skin, the bitter taste of his essence, it was enough to motivate her through to the end. It fueled the burning desire to bring him back to her, to reclaim her own fate and ensure his protection. As she approaches, a group of bikers huddles around a small fire, their leather-clad forms outlined against the flickering flames. The ominous glow of the fire reveals a face that is not the same as the one she'd previously encountered. However, the viper head patch they wear distinguishes the group as another faction of the biker gang. Her heart hammers against her ribs, and she ducks behind a large tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body trembling as she assesses the situation. Is this group waiting for her, or for Primal? Uncertainty swirls in Leela's mind. A strange sense of affinity connects her to the panther emblem on her jacket as her heart picks up speed. The fur of her costume vibrates with a force she has never known, a hidden power awaiting to burst forth. Her muscles coil, preparing to spring into action, transforming her figure into a menacing predator. She meticulously surveys the perimeter of the clearing where the bikers are gathered, the shadows of the forest providing an almost perfect camouflage. Her every move is calculated, each breath measured, and she becomes one with the shadows. The bikers, initially engrossed in their sordid conversations, seem oblivious to her presence. Leela moves with the stealth and grace of a panther, her eyes scanning the darkness, assessing the opposing numbers, positions, and intentions. The primal need to find primal surges within, directing her steps, sharpening her senses. The smell of the bikers' sweat, the crackle of their fire, the shifting of their lawn chairs and clothing, all are but music to her prey-driven instincts. But just as she is about to slip away unnoticed, a heavy boot slams into her back, sending her crashing to the cold, damp earth. The impact roars through her, taking her breath away. A hand, gloved in leather, clamps over her mouth, swiftly stifling her scream. A second hand wraps around her neck, the grip firm but not choking. SHH, a gravelly whisper echoes in her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. It is not the voice of any biker, but something different, something that ignites a mix of fear, terror, and strangely, a sense of hope within her. The hand pressing against her mouth moves to her throat, and slowly, the thumb presses against her pulse. "Don't make a sound, little kitten." The words, a low purr, promise mercy if she obeys.